Okay. Om Sahana Vavatu
Sadhana Bhavatu
Sahanao Punaktu
Sahanau Punatu
Sahaviryam Karavavahai Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Tamastu Tejasvina Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahai Ma Vidvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Inhale. Om Yogena Chittasya Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacham Padena Vacham Malam Sharirasya Cha Malam Sharirasya Cha Vaidyakena Vaidyakena Yopakarotam Yopakarotam Pravaram Muninam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim Patanjalim Pranjali Ranatosmi Pranjali Ranatosmi Abahu Abahu Purushakaram Purushakaram Shankachakrasi Shankachakrasi Dharinam Dharinam Sahasrashirasham Sahasrashirasham Shvetam Shvetam Pranamami Pranamami Patanjalim Patanjalim Srimate Srimate Anandaya Anandaya Nagarajaya Nagarajaya Namo Namaha Namo Namaha Namo Namaha Namo Namaha Namo Namaha Namo Namaha Beautiful, thank you. Okay, so Sadhana Pada. We're starting the second chapter, yes? The very beginning of the second chapter. Probably, well, they're all important. I was going to say probably the most important one, but they're all important. How's my sound coming across on Zoom here? You guys hear me well? Okay, good. I'm not using my mic. The second chapter is Sadhana Pada. I think it's very important because the first chapter is mostly the theory. There are a few practices, but mostly theory. Most sutras are written like that. You've got the first chapter tells you what is this subject, what is the theory of this subject, whether it be yoga, bhakti, whatever, or kama, like Kama Sutra, Bhakti Sutra, Yoga Sutra. Then the second chapter is tells you how to practice, how how to attain the theory. Like what is the means? What is the means? How can I bridge point A to point B? Point A being where I am now, point B being the theory of the subject. right? First chapter said yoga is absolute peace of mind. Absolute peace of mind. Yoga is absolute peace of mind. So that's the goal. Point A is here. I'm here now. I don't have peace of mind. How do I get peace of mind? Sadhana is the means. Sadhana is the means. Sadhana means means. It means. A lot of people and a lot of books will say sadhana means practice. Sadhana means practice. This is a chapter on practice. Practice or means. Yeah? Practice or means. Practice or means to an end. Sadhana also means spiritual practice. Spiritual practice. Sadhana also means spiritual practice. Remember earlier in the first chapter, we were introduced to a word called abhyasa. Abhyasa. And abhyasa means practice as well. So the distinction between abhyasa and sadhana is your spiritual practice, and abhyasa means long and uninterrupted practice, like doing something without interruption, right? Okay, so it's just more specific, right? So let us dive into this second chapter, the sadhana pada. Sadhana, this chapter it lists the practices that prepares the mind for samadhi. It prepares the mind for samadhi. An overview of the chapter, in the beginning, he talks about several things. Let's just kind of write it down real quick. So he talks about two types of yoga. Two types of yoga. One he calls Kriya Yoga. You see that? Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga. And then he mentions Ashtanga Yoga. He understands that there are different levels of practitioners. Remember in the first chapter he broke down different levels of practitioners or yogis, and then he also mentioned even within those different levels, they had different levels of accomplishments. Remember, he's breaking it all down. He understands that not everyone is going to be full on yoga. You're not going to be a full-time, dedicate your life to yoga. And then you have other people who kind of dabble into yoga. So he breaks it up. He says Kriya Yoga, he didn't say this, but he hints that Kriya Yoga is essentially for the part-timer. There's the part-timer. So we'll say part-time yoga. And Ashtanga Yoga is for the full-time yogi. And then later on, he talks about towards the end of the second chapter, he'll talk about some of the benefits or powers or siddhis or accomplishments that you can get from doing the practice. So let's begin. First sutra is tapas swadhyaya ishvara pranidhanani kriya yogaha. This is essentially for the entry-level yogi. Entry-level yogi. And he calls it Kriya Yoga. What is tapa or tapas? Where did we see this? We haven't seen this yet. This is the first time he said it. Okay, yeah. So tapas. He says tapas is it is defined as the reduction of distraction, reducing distraction. But the word tapas comes from the root word that means burn or glow or heat. Oftentimes, people will translate tapas as discipline, or because it comes from the word heat or glow, a fiery, a passionate discipline. But Krishnamacharya says tapas is mostly disciplining the senses. Disciplining the senses. How are we distracted in our experience? Usually by something we hear. Like right now, we hear an airplane. That can be distracting, right? Or we might see a duck or a squirrel, and we might get distracted by it. So it's learning to tame the senses. Or we might smell something nice, and so we want to move towards that, whether it be a bed of flowers, food, or perfume or cologne. Something pleasant draws us, distracts us. And so tapas is ultimately disciplining the senses. As a yogi, we want to reduce tamas from the external world and rajas from the external world, so that we continuously take in sattva, more and more clarity and truth and lightness. And that's how we discipline the senses. The most important sense or sense organ to control is what? What do you think?
Breath.
The breath? No.
Eyes.
Eyes of mind.
No. Well, breath is not a sense organ.
Your
It is
eyes.
important to control
Oh, the mouth.
eyes. Eyes? No, not eyes. It's close. Eyes is very important.
The mouse? Oh, no,
I'm
the
sorry?
nose. The nose. The nose.
Your nose? No. Ears? No.
Taste.
It's your tongue. Krishnamacharya says that weakness of the tongue will hinder your progress in yoga, which is speak too much, eat too much, right? Speak too much and eat too much. So this is not discussed in asana class at the gym. We don't talk about this. It's mostly about the body. But if you want to succeed in yoga, you have to learn to control your tongue. So tapas is discipline your tongue. Speak words that are truthful, that are not harmful, right? Control what you put in your mouth and control what comes out of it. Okay? So that is tapas. There's more to talk about tapas, but let's move on. The next one is called swadhyaya or svadhyaya. Sva means a self, and swadhyaya means to study on your own. One, it means to study on your own, but two, more importantly, it means to study anything that brings you closer to the self-knowledge. And Krishnamacharya would say, if for a religious person, that would be one's religious studies, but for a spiritual person, it could be, Yoga Sutras or something like that. But for, I would say for the masses, it is anything that brings you closer to self-knowledge. And at the entry level, psychology is okay. I would say psychology is okay, but modern psychology or Western psychology is pretty limited. There's so many different psychologies, and it seems every decade there's something new, something greater that replaces the old paradigm, right? If you study psychology, it's like, well, that method's outdated. We're going to go with this new method. It's better. And then 10 years from now, guess what? That's going to get outdated and something else is going to come around and it's going to be better. You know, right now there's this idea of parts. Have you heard of parts? Like you have different parts of your mind. This part wants this part does that, and, which is fine. And it's nice to compartmentalize, but here, the Yoga Sutras, this psychology hasn't changed in over 2,500 years because it works. So it's interesting because I had a sit down with one of my friends who wrote a book. Her name's Amina. Her book's up on my shelf over there. And she's a psychologist. And we sat down and talked about the Yoga Sutra. And she goes, that is fascinating. It's so simple, and it's right on. But I think one of the things that these modern doctors are, I wouldn't say concerned, but they might say it's too simple. It needs to be more specific. I'm like, well, they're written real simply, but as a practitioner, you dive in and you can see the subtleties between everything, but it takes practice. Everything in the Yoga Sutras is practical knowledge. It's something that you can actually practice and see the results with. So while the instructions in the book are very broad and simple, we find that the details are revealed within practice. Okay, so Swadhyaya. Swadhyaya is a study, to self-study, to be motivated to set time aside and study on your own. Don't just wait to come to class to study, right? All right, and the subject is the self. All right. Number 3, Ishvara Pranidhanani. So we've seen this word before, right? Where have we seen this word? Or this phrase? Ishvara Pranidhana Atva. That's the 23rd, 24th sutra of the first chapter. Ishvara Pranidhana Atva. If you look at that, from the first chapter, he ends it with the word va. Do you guys remember that? Ishvara Pranidhana va. What does va mean? Va means or. Va means or. Ishvara Pranidhana va. In the first chapter. Because he gives you different methods, right? Different methods to achieve samadhi. Here, because we're talking to an entry-level practitioner, he doesn't say that it's an or. He doesn't say Ishvara Pranidhana Atva. He says Ishvara Pranidhanani. Ishvara Pranidhanani. Nani means it's more like, it's like an imperative. It's like you need to surrender to something greater than yourself. You need to, for an entry-level practitioner, see, the thing is the entry-level practitioner can be so lost in one's own mind that it's difficult to recognize anything greater. And so Patanjali says you need to recognize there's something greater than you, right? There's something greater than you. I had a student once, and we were talking about this, and the word surrender came up, and he goes, man, I just can't surrender. At least he was honest, and he knew that he couldn't surrender, because he was like, my ego is so strong, I just find it so hard to surrender. And so what this is telling me is that Patanjali is saying that you need to learn to be humble in your yoga practice. If you want to learn peace of mind, the first step is to find humility. Ishvara Pranidhanani. Humility by giving up the fruits of your actions to something greater than yourself. This is Ishvara Pranidhanani, right? To give up the fruits of your actions, make your actions an offering to something greater than yourself. Make your actions an offering to something greater than yourself. Ishvara Pranidhanani. Understand? And a part of this is to perform sattvic activities. Remember we talked about there's rajas, tamas, and sattva. So rajasic activities would be self-serving. Tamasic activities are hurting others. And sattvic activities uplift everyone. Yes? Okay. So do sattvic activities and then give up the fruits of those efforts to the Lord. Give up the fruits of those efforts to the Lord. Do sattvic activities, I'm repeating, do sattvic activities and give up the fruits of your labor to the Lord. And he calls these 3 steps Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga is very short and sweet. So recapping, what is Kriya Yoga? Tame your senses. Eat less, speak less, practice more. Study. And do sattvic activities and give up the fruits of your labor to the Lord. This is Kriya Yoga. Now, Patanjali wrote this, well, he didn't write it, he passed it on orally, about 2,500 years ago, according to the historians and the scholars. So, and while this hasn't changed, Krishnamacharya would like to add one thing. So instead of 3 steps, there are 4 steps according to Krishnamacharya. Asana practice. You got to take care of your body. So I think it's very applicable today because most people who find yoga find it through the physical practice anyway, right? So we can add Kriya Yoga to the 3 steps. So modern day Kriya Yoga includes physical practice. Got to take care of your body. The practice and control over the senses, this is straight from the book. The practice and control over the senses, tapas, theoretical study of an appropriate religion or psychology, and the worshiping of the Lord are these 3, all of these together are called Kriya Yoga. And it's not like you do one, you do all 3 together. If you want it to be, if it's not considered Kriya Yoga unless all is done. Like you can't just be like, I'm going to reduce my, control my senses and say I'm practicing yoga. There's more than that, right? You got to do all 3 plus your asanas. Then you can say you're an entry-level yogi. Otherwise, just practicing asanas alone or just controlling the senses alone, it's just another discipline. It's not yoga. I'm going to grab my reading glasses because I didn't do my headstand today. Okay. Right. Another thing about tapas is tapas means austerity. Tapas means austerity. What is austerity?
It's like strict. Being like strict, right?
Being strict?
Austere.
Austere? Being strict? In what sense? Being strict in what sense?
So unbending. Like austere measures would be like very strict, unbending, not being flexible, not giving, not taking into consideration mitigating factors.
Can you guys hear him? Yes? Okay. All right. Anybody else? austerity. I don't know if you remember, if you guys follow geopolitics, but do you remember when the Greek government had a shutdown?
Yes.
I don't know, 5 years ago. They went through austere measures and forced the people to live in austerity. What does that mean? It means getting by with less. Getting by with less. So austerities is to get by with little. So it is strict in that sense.
They wouldn't allow them to default on their loans.
Sure.
That's
But let's stay on the subject here. But
in that sense,
and that's
it was austerity.
okay. So yeah, but the idea though is that they had to learn to get by with less. In other words, let's see what does the internet say? Austerity meaning sternness or severity in manner or attitude. Yeah, that's what you said, Pete, right? Conditions characterized by severity, sternness, or asceticism. Wait, asceticism. I can't say this. Can you see it? Asceticism. Lack. There it is. Lack. Plainness. There it is. Plainness. So austerity here, I mean, one of the meanings is plainness or lack. Getting by with less. Getting by with lack. Yeah? Make sense? And yoga, the practice of tapas, it's like eat less, speak less, get by with less. What I did, which was interesting, we're so affected by temperature. We want so many comforts, right? Especially here in Texas, we love our AC. And you get in the car and you crank up the AC. You go somewhere, you sleep and you keep the AC real cold, real low. But as the deeper into the yoga practice that I got, the less I used AC because I was like putting up with discomfort. So there's this element, this idea of putting up with suffering, austere, to put up with pain. When you're doing your asanas, it's pretty austere. You're putting up with your being comfortable, being uncomfortable. I remember at some point I got so comfortable being uncomfortable that I would, in the heat of the summer, in the middle of the summer, I would get in my car. It was probably 110, 120 degrees in there, and I was loving it. And I would keep my windows rolled up, not turn my AC on, and just drive to my destination and just be totally okay. Music. I remember in high school, we get into my girlfriend's car, and before she would drive off, she would have to find a song, a station, and she would spend sometimes 5 minutes finding the song before we would drive off. And I remember I would always have to have music on. But at some point I was like, you know what? I don't need music. I can be fine without music in the car. So these I started taking away things in my life as a discipline to help me connect to the present moment, to help me be comfortable when things got uncomfortable. Make sense? So I made my practices austere in many ways. I think is it the Catholic monks, or was it the Christian monks, or where they flog themselves? What's the form of penance or something like that? That's austere, right? But Krishnamacharya says you shouldn't do that. Kaya klesha, harming the body, is not appropriate. But at the same time, when you're stretching your muscles and you're stretching your joints, at the beginning, it's uncomfortable. And you're having to learn to breathe through it, right? So asana itself is an austere practice, right? Speaking less. So there's a word called mitahara and mitabarshana. Mitabarshana. I'm not going to write it down, but it means moderate your speaking. Mitabarshana, moderate your speech. And mitahara, hara means taking food. So mitahara means to take less. Okay, yeah. Okay. Here's something that's interesting. Here's a quote or a saying that I oftentimes used in teaching, is to look hungry like a wolf. Have you heard me say that before? Look hungry like a wolf. Like when you're doing downward facing dog, you know, like a dog or a greyhound, their belly pulls in. They look hungry, right? So that a yogi should look hungry like a wolf. If one eats, have I told you the story of the yogi, bogi, and rogi? Have I told you guys a story? I think it's a good time for a story. So there are three people. They're a yogi, a bogi, and a rogi. It's like almost like a joke, right? It's not. So what is a rogi? Rogi means one who is sick. A rogi is one who is sick, right? Physically sick. A bogi, B-H-O-G-I, bogi. A bogi is one who just likes to enjoy their senses. Like I think the word is a hedonist. Is that right? A hedonist? Someone who just likes to enjoy lots of pleasure. And a yogi is one who practices austerities. Yeah. A yogi eats once a day. A bogi eats twice a day. And a rogi eats thrice a day. It's just it's a story. Is that a story? Whatever. It's a saying, whatever. That a yogi eats less, but one who likes to enjoy, because our bodies, unless we're like a professional athlete or constantly doing manual labor, we don't really need a whole lot of food. We really don't. We only need to eat once a day. As a matter of fact, one of my friends, he's probably late 60s now. His whole life, he eats one meal a day. His whole life. Doesn't eat more than once. He's not even a yogi. He's a businessman. So he goes, I don't need it. He goes, we don't need to eat more than once a day. But most of us are bogies because we like to enjoy our food. There's a social aspect to it, and we just like to please our taste buds, and our sense of smell, and the texture, and all that. Food is great, but what happens is we can become too addicted, and then we end up eating too much, and then we become a rogi. Remember, yogi, bogi, rogi. Okay. Right. Okay, so moving on. The second sutra says samadhi, bhavanarthaha klesha tanu karanartashcha artashcha. Okay. Some books will say that by the practice of Kriya Yoga gives samadhi. If you come across that is incorrect. Kriya Yoga does not give samadhi. Kriya Yoga prepares you for samadhi. Kriya Yoga prepares for samadhi. So basically, what is the second word? Bhavan. Nartha is the conditioning or preparation of the mind for samadhi. Klesha means pain. And karana means doing. What is it doing? It's reducing. Tanu karana means reducing like to thin out, to shave, to thin out, to reduce, to make lean. This is tanu. Tanu means to make lean. And our tascha is the goal. So for the sake of, what is the goal? Samadhi. We do Kriya Yoga. Why? It reduces pain. And by reducing pain, it prepares you for Samadhi. Reduces pain and prepares you for Samadhi. The purpose of Kriya Yoga is to prepare the mind for Samadhi and to reduce pain. Because it makes the mind fit to concentrate. Can you see how managing your senses can prepare you to concentrate? Can you see how studying about oneself can help you to concentrate? Knowing oneself, right? And also giving up the fruits of your efforts to something greater than yourself. Can you see how that can help you to concentrate? You know, there's this idea that we become attached to the outcome. We become very attached to the outcome of our work. And I noticed this a lot when I was in sales. You had goals and you try to meet these goals or exceed the goals. And if you meet the goals, then you're happy. If you miss the goals, then you feel bad, right? And I think that goes with anything. But I found, and I was in the mortgage business when I found yoga, I hadn't even started studying the sutras yet, but I remember it was in the Gita actually. The Gita says, you're entitled to the work, but not the fruits of your labor, in the Bhagavad Gita. And I remember that, and I applied that to my mortgage business. And after a few months, I became alike in victory and defeat, in success and failure. That if I hit my goals, I was the same. I was like, cool, hit the goals. I didn't hit the goals, cool, I was the same. And so that attitude, and that bhav, that mood, the feeling came, I think, directly from the study of yoga for me. Because before that, I remember I'd be so depressed and down and freaking out. Oh my God, how am I going to pay my bills? Or whatever, right? Or if I have a good month in the mortgage business, and when you have a good month, you can have a really good month. Drinks on me. Let's go blow all the money over. Like 2 weeks, all the money's gone. Anyways, right. So when you give up the fruits of your efforts, you have nothing to really think about. You just do your best, leave the rest. Do the best and leave the rest. Do your best, leave the rest, because it really isn't up to us in the end. Okay. Third sutra. Okay, so this is a very important one. So then the question that arises is, what is klesha? What is klesha? He mentions pain a while ago. He mentions klesha. What is klesha? Klesha. There are 5 kleshas. Pancha kleshas. Pancha kleshas. What are the 5 kleshas? The first one is called avidya. Avidya. What is avidya? Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Avidya is so see that? Okay. Alexa, turn on the living room lights.
Sure. What do you want to turn on?
Living room lights. You still see that okay? Is that glare? Okay. Vidya. So the word vidya, the root word is vidya. What is vidya? Vidya means knowledge. Vidya means knowledge. Avidya is the opposite of knowledge. So avidya is
No knowledge.
not knowledge. I'm sorry?
No.
Yeah. No, you said
Ignorance.
it.
Ignorance.
Yeah, that's what, that's good. So a lot of books will say ignorance.
Wrong knowledge.
Wrong knowledge. Yeah.
Knowledge. So it's wrong. It's more wrong knowledge than ignorance, but it's both. Most books will say wrong knowledge, like your Swami Satchitananda book. Most of them will say it's ignorance. But let's explore this idea for a moment. Ignorance comes ignorance. So gnosis means knowledge. Gnosis means knowledge. Ignorance is not knowing. So if I didn't know, for example, a friend of mine, I don't know, had a big loss. If I didn't know about it, then I would be ignorant about it, right? I'd be ignorant to it. But if my friend had a loss and I thought it was a gain, that would be wrong knowledge. See the difference? Avidya, see, here's the thing. It's not that I don't know who I am. It's just that I think I'm something I'm not. Right? When I look at myself in the mirror, I identify with the body, the image that I see in the mirror. And so when I identify with that, we call it avidya. It's not that I don't know, it's I think I know who I am, but who I think I am is not right. And then one day, I'm like, who the hell am I? I thought I knew. It's not that I didn't know. It's not that I had no idea who I was, right? Growing up, our first ignorance is what? Is this waking up? I am awake. And then you identify with this mind-body complex. And then your parents teach you your name, and then you start identifying with this name. So it's not like you don't know who you are. You have an idea of who you are. And then as you grow up, you start to develop likes and dislikes, strengths and weaknesses. And then you create a personality, this idea of who you are. And then you go to junior high and high school, and then you have peer pressure, and then you start picking peer groups, and then you start identifying with that. And then you outgrow it. You go to college, then you identify with something else if you go to college, and you might outgrow that. And every few years, we sort of have this reinventing of ourselves of some sort. Would you guys agree with that? To some degree, right? So it's not necessarily I don't know who I am. It's just I identify with this idea of who I am, and it's not the truth of who I am. That is called avidya. But some people will go through life not knowing who they are, and then you can say that's ignorance as well. So both are valid, but I think at a more subtle and precise level, that avidya means wrong knowledge more than it means ignorance. The ignorance is this. If someone is so attached, we just watched the movie The Matrix the other night. Let's say someone is so attached to this idea of who they are in the Matrix that they have no idea that there's a spiritual realm that exists, then you can say that's ignorance. They're ignorant to the spiritual realm. But they still have an identification. They still identify with an aspect or an idea of who they think they are. And that is all within the Matrix. The Matrix is your chitta. The Matrix is your chitta. It's this holodeck. It's this place that seems so real, but it's not. Okay. So avidya.
How is
Yes.
that, sorry, how is that different than the wrong knowledge that we talked about in the first?
Good question. So Andrea asked, can you guys, okay, yeah, you can hear. Can you hear her? She said that, how is that different from wrong knowledge that we learned in the first chapter? Great question. It's not.
Okay,
It's almost the same thing.
different word, same meaning,
Similar meaning.
similar meaning.
Very similar. Yes. Very similar. Good question. So it's like the word in the first chapter. See, what is the pramana, viparya, vikalpa, pramana, viparya. Viparya means incorrect cognition. Incorrect cognition. It's the same idea.
Okay.
I'm cognizing who I think I am, but it's not right. So avidya here refers to spiritual knowledge. But you can also, people will use the word avidya towards other objects as well. But because we're on a spiritual text, this refers to the spiritual self, knowledge of the spiritual self. Okay? Question. So avidya is the first one. Avidya. The next one is called asmita. Asmita. So asmi means I am. Asmi means I am, and ta is sort of a grammatical ending that refers to a feeling. So asmita is this feeling of I. This feeling of I. Some books, some people might say that asmita means egotism. Egotism. See, there are two words I want to have you think about. One is ego, which is a thing, right? A subtle thing. You can't box it or anything, but it's a thing. And then there's egotism. There's a difference between ego and egotism, yes? Okay, ego and egotism. So it is ego, and it's hard to transcribe or to translate these words because English and Sanskrit are so different. There's ego is a sense of self, yeah? A sense of self, a sense of who I am, personality, right? A sense of who I am. Asmita is not that, it's a feeling that I exist. What is this feeling? How can you identify this feeling? Can you identify this feeling? I can tell you when you can identify this feeling. It's that feeling you get when you come out of Shavasana. You ever have a Shavasana where you felt like you didn't exist? Right? So the moment you come out of Shavasana, it's like, I'm back. That's asmita. It's like that. It just happens like that. Then after it happens, and you have that feeling that I exist, it gets buried by all the other feelings that you have. When your mind is absolutely quiet, in the moments that you don't exist, and then you come back into existence, asmita can be felt. Then you become distracted by all the other feelings and thoughts. If you can get into a meditative space, that happens when you come out of your meditation. If you can be alert in your three states of awareness, wake, dream, and sleep. Wake, dream, and sleep. If you can become so meditative and lucid between these three states of consciousness, you will notice the moment you wake up, you feel asmita. It's a happy feeling. It's a happy feeling. Usually. Unless you have a good dream, you're like, man, I wanted to keep dreaming. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Like, oh man, that was a good dream. Dang it. But then you're distracted by the dream, so you're not really feeling this asmita. You have to wake up calm. And the way you do that, and I'm talking from experience, the way you do that is by developing a steady, consistent, powerful meditation practice. So that you can be conscious as you fall asleep, that you're conscious as you're dreaming, and you're conscious when you wake up. That moment that you transition between deep sleep and awake, asmita happens. We see this in children. Newborns. They fight sleep as if they're going to die. Oftentimes, they fight sleep as if they're going to die because they don't know that they're not going to come back. They probably think that they're going to die again, and so they don't want to die again. No, I'm already back. I want this existence. I've waited so long, and I'm here now. I don't want to go away. No. And then they pass out. And then the moment they wake up, what do? I'm back! Asmita. Understand? That's asmita. It happens very quickly. So that's the subtle experience of asmita. But then as we identify with this self, it becomes egoism or egotism. Okay? So it comes on very subtle at first, but it builds up, and then we get this whole. And the egotism here goes both ways. It's inflated and deflated. People suffer from both sides. Like a large sense of self and a small sense of self. It's still an identification. We identify with this part of the mind that gives identity, right? It gives identity. So, asmita is the feeling that I exist. You can say it's egotism, and it goes both ways. It goes, it's either grandiose, inferiority complex. You ever heard of that? Yeah. Anyways, asmita. So there's another word in yoga it's not in our book, but I'm going to introduce it here. It's called ahamkara. These two words are sort of like ego in yoga. So asmita is ego, and ahamkara is also ego. What it means is ahamkara is, again, aham means I am, similar to asmi. Aham means I am. Kara means doing, right? Kara or karma or krama. So this is the doer. Means doer. There's a part of you that is doing. So this is the self that acts, the acting self. Ahamkara. You might see this sometime. I just want to drop it in, but it's not part of the kleshas. So avidya, asmita, raga, devesha, and abhinavesha. Next one is called raga. Raga means attachment. Raga means attachment. Raga means to be stuck. As a matter of fact, in classical Indian music, the word raga means melody. You ever get a song stuck in your head? Because of its raga. Because it's stuck, it's attached. Raga means attached. It also means melody and music. It means attachment. Raga means attachment. The next one is called devesha. Devesha means it's the opposite of attachment. What is the opposite of attachment? Aversion. So one is you want to bring it more, you want to bring it close to you, you want more of it. Whereas devesha is you want to push it away. So it's like magnets, two magnets coming together, raga. But then you flip the magnets and you have the same polarity, or north or positive, whatever. Aversion. I don't want it. I have an aversion to it. I don't want it. Or this, I like it. Give me more. Attachment. And then the last one is called abhinavesha. 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 I think I almost right. Abhinavesha. Abhinavesha means fear. And it means fear of losing. Fear of losing. Fear of losing something that you have. Fear of loss. Fear of loss. Abhinavesha means fear of loss. Fear of loss. And what is your most prized possession? Your body. Fear of losing your body. So then this can be translated as fear of death. Fear of death. I don't want to not exist. I have asmita. I want to exist. I have a feeling that I exist. I exist right now. I know I exist because I'm thinking, I'm feeling, I'm experiencing. I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose this. Most people have this ignorance that, or wrong knowledge that we will live forever until one day we realize we won't, right? So those are the 5 kleshas. Avidya, smita, raga, dvesha, bhinavesha, klesha. So going back to avidya, we said that avidya is wrong knowledge, but it's also ignorance. Ramaswamy says that wrong is worse than lack of. Wrong knowledge is worse than lack of knowledge because you're misidentifying. But if you're ignorant to it, that's better than wrong. Wrong is worse than lack of. I thought that was pretty deep when he said that. Now, of the five kleshas, the first one is unseen. Avidya is unseen. You can't tell someone has spiritual ignorance or spiritual wrong knowledge by looking at them. It's not something that, even the Buddha said that you can't tell a Buddha by looking at them. You can't tell someone's a Buddha by looking at them. But the last 4, asmita, raga, dvesha, and abhinavesha, are visible. They're visible. Okay, moving on. The next few sutras, he's going to explain each of these words in more detail. So avidya being wrong knowledge. Kshetram means a field. It's a field or a garden or a breeding ground. Uttaresham means subsequent. The other kleshas, right? Avidya, and then the other kleshas, the 4 following. Prasupta. Supta means sleep. Prasupta is like sleeping in the non-manifest form. Tanu, as we said, Tanu means sprouting or manifesting. It's indicative. It's showing. Vichina, intermittent. Sometimes there, sometimes not. Udhara means unrestricted. There all the time. And nam being just a dual case ending in Sanskrit. So here he's saying that there are 4 levels of avidya. 4 levels of avidya. And that it is the breeding ground for the rest. So avidya can be unrestricted, meaning someone who's so lost in ignorance and wrong knowledge. It's a constant thing. It's moment by moment, no interruption, living in a state of ignorance, making choices from this place of ignorance. And for some who are practiced, they're practicing, it comes and goes, it's intermittent. And then with more practice, you can reduce it to sprouts or manifesting, and then prasupta means it's non-manifest, it's dormant. Prasupta can also mean it's dormant. But it doesn't mean it's not eradicated. Just because it's dormant doesn't mean it's eradicated, right? Just because it's not manifesting doesn't mean it's gone. So what does the sutra say? That avidya is the breeding ground for the rest of the kleshas, as everything is linked to spiritual ignorance. Kriya Yoga will not remove avidya. Kriya Yoga will not remove avidya. But Kriya Yoga will inform one about it, will educate you about it, will make you aware of it. Kriya Yoga. Entry-level yoga, remember entry-level yoga, Kriya Yoga does not give samadhi. It only prepares you for it. So therefore it will not remove it, it will just make you aware of it. And as we know in psychology, that awareness of any problem is 80% of the solution to the problem. Well, that's what I've heard. Have you heard that? Okay. Yeah, awareness is key, right? Number 5, 5th sutra. Anitya. So anitya means impermanent. Nitya means forever. Nitya means forever. Anitya means not forever, right? So impermanent. Asuchi means impure. Suchi means pure. Or saucha, suchi means pure. Asuchi means impure. Dukkha means pain or sorrow. And anatmasu. Anatma means not the self. Atma means the self, so anatma means not the self. These 4 things, when thought that they are the next 4 things, nitya, suchi, sukha, and atma, whenever you have that sort of misunderstanding, we call that avidya. So what is avidya? He's being very specific here. What is avidya? Avidya is confusing that which is temporal to that which is permanent. Confusing that which is impermanent with that which is permanent. When does that happen? How often do we
All the time.
all the freaking time? Is that we confuse the temporary with the permanent. Like when I'm in my darkest, deepest, saddest moments, the reason I suffer, see, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. When I'm in my deepest, darkest, painful moments, I don't have to suffer. I'll suffer if I think that that is going to last forever. That's when I suffer. But when I know that it's going to end because it's impermanent, I don't have to suffer. Does that make sense? But I catch myself sometimes thinking that it's not going to end. And that's when I was suicidal. That's when I was suicidal. I thought there was no way out. This isn't going to end. And there's only one way out. I remember having these thoughts. There's only one way out. But this was after yoga too, by the way. It was like 2017, 18, 19. And I remember, if I didn't have the yoga to remind myself that it's temporary and don't believe everything your mind tells you, I don't think I would have gotten out of it. And if I didn't have the support and love of my friends near and far, I don't think I'd be here today. But ultimately, it was my daughter. Star saved me. But that's another story. But I remember having those experiences and thinking to myself, this isn't going to end. This isn't going to end. And I remembered the sutras. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. And then the second thing is thinking things that are impure to be pure. Our ignorance or wrong knowledge of thinking this body is pure. It's so dirty. This body is very dirty. It's constantly producing waste. Yes? Skin, dead skin cells all the time. Hair, nails, doesn't stop. Mucus, poop, urine, plaque, right? Constantly. The body is not pure. But we think it's so pure. Ignorance. If you really want to purify the body, you need to fast. Get rid of all the dross, all the impurities. Dukkha, pain and sorrow. How many times you see people, and yourself included, you see something, you do something, you seek something that is painful, but thinking it produces joy. I was a meth addict. I can tell you firsthand. Smoking cigarettes. Oh, it's so pleasurable. In the moment maybe, but long term, it's not. So once I figured that out, I stopped smoking speed. Truth be told, I do think about it sometimes, but I don't go there because the yoga is more important. My relationships more important. Anatma. So atma means your soul. Atma means soul or self. Anatma means that which is not the self. So we see this all the time. People refer to the mind as the soul. People refer to the mind as consciousness. Or people think the body is the soul. The body is the self. And that's ignorance. And then you hear this all the time. This is, from the yogic perspective, the soul doesn't feel. It's the mind that feels, and the soul experiences the mind. The soul doesn't think, but we hear this language all the time. My soul wanted it so bad. That's ignorance. The soul doesn't want anything. It's the mind that wants. But the soul experiences the wanting of the mind. See, you gotta separate Purusha from Prakriti. This is what the Patanjali's been talking about this whole time. Having the distinction, be able to distinguish between the Purusha and Prakriti. Very difficult. That confusion is anumatsu. I'm sorry, anamatsu, not anu, anamatsu. Is to confuse the self with a non-self. What is non-self? Prakriti. What is the self? Purusha. But we identify with Prakriti as being self. I'm this body, I'm this mind, my accomplishments, I'm the things in this material world. I am existing in this matrix, and the matrix isn't even real. Chitta, right? The space or the field from which we all experience things is the chitta. Your whole experience is your chitta. Your whole reality is your chitta. So the four things again: impermanence with permanence, impure with pure, pain and sorrow with pleasure and joy, and non-self with self. When you confuse these things, we call it avidya. That is spiritual ignorance or spiritual wrong knowledge, okay? It's having the conviction or considering those things that which are impermanent, impure, painful, and non-self to be permanent, pure, happy, and the self. This is called avidya. Meditate on this. Contemplate on this. Avidya. Six, drugdharshana shaktyo ekatmata eva as if asmita. So drug is, it says seeing or observing, but drug is the seer. You can write seer there, seer. Darshana means showing that which is seen. So there's a subject object. Drug is a subject. Darshana is the object, that which is seen. The seer and that which is seen. Shaktyo, Shakti. Shakti is the word Shakti. Shakti means power, the power of seeing. The power of seeing. Eka means one. Eka means oneness. Right? Ekat mata means oneness. So, as if, Eva, as if. It's as if the seer and the seen are one. It's as if the seer and the seen are one. What is that which you're seeing? You see, he's not talking about external objects here. He's talking about internal objects. What you see in your mind is what he's talking about. Darshana is what you're seeing in your mind. So you are the seer, and then you're seeing what's projected by your mind. It's as if these two things are one. That is asmita. So it's that moment you wake up. The seer within wakes up, right? You wake up from your shavasana, or you wake up from your deep sleep, and you have this moment of awareness. What are you aware of? What are you aware of in that moment? I'm sorry?
Yourself.
Yes, well, yourself, but which self? The real self or the false self? False self. You're aware of your mind. In that moment, you're aware of your mind. And then you identify with that mind immediately. This is asmita. You identify with this mind because this is the mind you take with you throughout the rest of the day. And now it's like, I'm having this experience. Who am I? I'm the mind. I'm the body. It's the first ignorance, known as asmita. Asmita is a false impression, the I exist feeling, which mistakenly sees two different things, the observer, pure consciousness, and the observed, chitta vrittis, the mind's activities, as being one. It mistakes the I exist feeling and its experiences as being the self. Does that make sense? It's a hard one to teach, but apparently I did a good job today, huh? It appears that the mind has consciousness. So this is an important distinction, chit and chitta. Your books And a lot of people will say that chitta means consciousness. Chitta means consciousness. It also says chit means consciousness. So that book that you have right there, both you guys have it, the Swami Satchitananda book. If you open it into the first sutra, second sutra, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha, what does he translate? How does he translate that? Does he use consciousness to describe chitta, to translate chitta?
Of the mind stuff, mind field.
Mind field? Okay, so bad example. There are other books. That's one of the better books, probably why I chose it. But there's some books that say that chitta translates chitta as being consciousness. Chit is consciousness. Chitta means that which seems to have consciousness. Chitta means that which is the mind. It seems we think it's conscious, but it's not conscious. We are conscious of the mind. Do you remember in Sunday's training when you guys came out of meditation, I said, if you can see it, before you opened your eyes, I said, if you can see it, you're not it. You guys remember that? You do remember it? Yeah. Yeah. I said, if your eyes are closed and you're in your mind's eye, and if you can see it, you're not it. That's huge. If you see it, you're not it, because you are not the object. The object is the mind's projections. So chitta is it. Is what you're seeing. You're seeing the chitta. You are chit. But because they're in such close proximity, we mistaken one for the other, because they're in such close proximity. Make sense? Chit means pure consciousness. Chitta means that which seems to have consciousness, behaves as if it is conscious. Okay, we've got about 6 minutes, 5 minutes. I think that's a good stopping point. Otherwise, I'll go over. So make note of that. We finished the second klesha, number 6, second chapter. 6 sutras in an hour and a half. Wow. Okay. Any questions or comments or any realizations you had from today's talk you want to share? Someone did a chat. Let me see. Someone chatted something. Wrong knowledge. Danielle. Okay. Yeah, you guys are all on the same page. Good job. Comments, questions? Let's sit quietly until someone has a question, and we'll do a 5-minute meditation. Okay? If you have a question, just feel free to chime in. Otherwise, let's just close our eyes and sit with everything that we've discussed today. Bringing your attention to the tip of the nose. And as you breathe in, notice that you're breathing in. And as you breathe out, notice that you are breathing out. See if you can follow one molecule of air as it enters through the rings of the nostrils. Through the passageways of the nostrils, through the sinus cavities, down the throat and the bronchial tubes, into the lungs, and then as you begin to exhale, you'll notice a different molecule of waste product traveling up the bronchial tubes, throat and the nasal passages, and the passageways of the nose, and out the rings of the nostrils. And stay with this for the next 3.5 minutes. Without opening your eyes. Keep the eyes closed and rub the hands together. Create some heat and cup the eyes. Bring the hands of prayer. May all beings everywhere be happy and free. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Breathe in for Om. Om. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.